Greetings. This little application is in VBDotNet with SQL behind the scenes. It employs buttons, data grid views, and some group boxes. Basically, I was looking at a poet that I have admired for some years, William Barnes, and I thought, let's have a list of poets. Then on top of that, you end up with a list of websites for each poet. So there's a list of URLs for each poet. And on top of that is a list of poems that each poet has done. So there's three main data grid views: the poet, the URL, and the poems. On top of that are the group boxes where I've allowed one for a new poet, one for a new URL, and one for a new poem. Behind the scenes, you can bulk load. So if you've got an Excel spreadsheet which lists 50 poems by a particular poet, you don't want to have to do that one at a time. So you go into SQL management and you can import that relatively simply. I did it once or twice. I've also allowed some exports of these things into, well, .csv files so they can be played with in Excel. So what we've got is data grid view for the poet, the URL, and the poems. Behind here we have this one, which is a list of poets and URLs. Again, you can export that into Excel. So if I run it, let's see what it does. I'll bring that one up here. So like I said, we have poets, we have URLs and poems. At the moment nothing is selected. So if I was to, yes, let's have a look at my hero, Mr. Barnes. William Barnes has a few URLs, and this is, I mean, I've got 4 of his poems. He's written dozens of them. I still have to flesh that one out. And who was the one that well, if I click on any of these things, it's a little slower than it was before. I don't know why. So we have various people who have URLs. Let's have a look. Mr. Whitman Stewart. Well, Walt Whitman, of course. Walt Whitman, I haven't loaded his poems yet. Siegfried Sassoon, very famous gentleman. I've only got, in most of these cases, I've only got the URLs. I haven't loaded the poems as yet. John Keats, well, there's a name. So I put in quite a few URLs for John. Basically, he's a poet that died tragically young. I think he was only about 25 when he died. And he was obviously a phenomenal master of words. So he's written all of these things. By the time he's 25 and he's done all this. Astonishing. So we have a relatively simple way of putting in a new poet there, first name, last name. I added a cancel to all of this. A new URL, by default, it selects whatever poet you are on. So in this case, John Keats. You can put in a new URL, save it, and it will be added to the list. And a new poem, similar kind of thing. You get the name, you type in the new poem, and all that sort of stuff. Now, the show URL list is another data grid view where you basically say, here's a list of all the poets and all their URLs, and you can scroll through that quite quickly. Now, down here you've got some export options, so you can export the poets to a particular file. You can export the poets and the URLs, or you can export the poems. Now, if I open the files, by default it opens in the folder that you saved them to. So a little while ago, a few days ago, I exported the poets and the poems. So if I double click that, it opens in Excel. And if I move that into the right window, we have John Keats and a whole list of poems that the guy wrote. Look at that. Incredible. So all of that is done. Anything else in this? When I delete anything, I don't actually physically delete it. There is an active yes or no marker on against each entry, and all I do is say move the active from a yes to a no, which means it's basically then just hidden from the display. If necessary, you can go behind the scenes and reset it, but it's unlikely. So this is poets, their URLs as I found them on Google searches, to be honest, and a list of their poems. This is not to highlight the application, this is to highlight some of the techniques that I've got employing multiple data grid views and multiple group boxes. All of this works pretty well, so I'm quite pleased with the coding. And talking of which, if I come out of that, we can then go and have a look at the coding. So here, this is the screen layout. I've moved the group boxes over here to the far right just to avoid having too much layered on top of each other. It just gets confusing because you don't know what the heck you're looking at. The code, if I go up to the, well, looking at the bottom, I've got 554 lines of code, which I think is pretty good, really. And some chunks of this is comment, so, you know, there's not 550 lines of active code. So, starting with the load, I set up the group boxes. I position them, and they're obviously visible equals false at this point in time. And then I've set things up, and then I load existing poets, which basically says, what poets have I got? Get me a list, last name, first name, and put it in that particular left-hand data grid view. Then the rest of this is triggered from that, depending on what you do. The code, I didn't come up with this in one go. I played with this for a little while. It took me a few days to play with this because I looked at something and I got so far and I thought, no, that's not going to work. So I changed it because I can. And here we go with some of the coding. I'll just skip through. If necessary, you'll have to look through this slowly later on by yourselves. And that's it, basically. So you can add new ones, you can take existing ones out of the list if you don't like them. That's me for the moment. I'll catch you later. Thanks very much. Bye bye.